why are you interested in Code for Houston? So I'll start off. I'm Grace Rodriguez, co-founder, executive director of Impact Hub Houston. What is my background? I worked in the city, I did consulting, I worked in entertainment, worked for a venture capital fund, a creative agency, and then co-founded Station Houston, a tech startup hub, and wanted to serve more diverse entrepreneurs. And that's what led me to Impact Hub Houston. What brings me to Code for Houston is that in those days of working in the tech community and doing consulting or startup community, we had done a lot of meetups through NetSquare. I don't know if you're familiar with that, or in TechSoup, and Sketch City when Jeff started that. We partnered with them on the Houston Hackathon and then on Climathon Houston. And so this idea of bringing tech folks together with people who are trying to do good in their communities is really appealing to me, and I want to activate more of it and help more people also understand they don't have to be coders and developers to also be able to solve problems in the city. So this is why I'm interested in Code for Houston. And I'm curious to learn more about each of you and what you actually want to achieve and how we can empower you to solve some challenges in the communities that you serve as well. I'll pass it to you, Muriel.
Hello, my name is Muriel. So great to be here. I work within the downtown launchpad with Civic. We're pretty excited in Houston. We're great to be here. I'm actually really interested in having learned a little bit more about Code for Houston and how the synergy with Code for Houston can go into
Hi, I am Regina. I am the founder of the US Space. I just finished the G Beta Houston cohort. I am one of the founding members of Impact Hub, and anything that Grace and Michelle are doing, I'm interested in, just in general, social impact, civic engagement, all of that stuff. And so I'm just curious about how I can connect and plug in and help move these initiatives forward.
I'm Kurt Walker. I don't fit into very many categories, but I actually am an engineer. I love to code, but that's not exactly why I'm really interested in this. I was really interested in, I discovered a year and a half ago, I guess, I was very interested in Impact Hub's vision and goals, and just I'm pretty much on my own in terms of my time now, so I was looking for how I could be useful to whatever groups, and so I've been sort of around the group for a while.
Thank you for being a part of it.
Hi, I'm Sana. I do not have a traditional background in tech. I actually work as a researcher at MD Anderson, but I do know how to code. And I've not really coded consistently in a couple of years, but I've been back into it again in the last 6 months or so. And I'm kind of at the point where, like, okay, if I just keep studying by myself, it's not going to stick. And I'd rather work on something and learn with other people around me. So I found this group meetup yesterday, and so I decided to sign up for it for really, like, whatever way I could help, I would love to.
Awesome, thank you. We were just talking about some opportunities with Houston Health, right?
Yeah,
Health or Harris Health?
Houston Community Action Council.
Yeah.
And the Houston Health Foundation.
So we definitely need somebody with expertise in healthcare research and.
Yeah, I'm more of a biologist type. So my degree is biomedical sciences, so that's kind of more what I know about. But anyway, I can help. I would love to.
Cool, thank you.
Sure. Hey everyone, I'm Simi Hundle. I'm a member of Impact Hub Houston, and that's how I found out about this event. I'm a founder of a small business. It's an independent insurance brokerage based out of Atlanta that services small to medium-sized businesses. And our second office is here in Houston, here in the co-working space. What am I curious about? I think, like just about everyone in this room, I want to make Houston a better place. And there's a lot of challenges that we have in the communities. And like Regina said, if there's anything that Michelle or Grace is a part of, I usually try to sign up as soon as possible. So I wanted to see what y'all were up to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jose, you don't have a choice.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Jose Avalos. I'm Michelle's husband. I do a lot of ball unfolding. Yeah, I generally enjoy it. We're all for changing the world too in our city. Michelle brings me here, but also I'm getting further into the tech space myself. Launching a company called Tech23, which is 22 represents 22 Latin American countries, and 23rd represents the Latino in the United States of America, and how we're just an ever-changing, ever being influenced by other Latin American countries here. So this conversation is important to me, and to learn about it so that we can provide value for the other Latinos in Houston. And what am I curious about? Everything. One of my, if you guys are into the personality styles, mine's like ENFP, so I'm always like curious about just literally everything that's interesting. I like to deep dive into documentaries and deep dive into things about space and wonder and what makes us human, and somehow incorporate that into the projects, into a lot of the design that I do. So I'm excited to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Natalia.
Yeah. Who are you?
Yes.
What brings you here? What are you curious about?
So who am I? Yes, I'm Natalia. I'm a certified web developer. I started coding in 1999. I am an event planner for the official WordPress meetup. What brings me here? I heard about this event through Impact Hub, and I'm curious about helping. Well, let me just say, I think I'm more curious about why people have a block on tech. Because when they think about tech, they think it's something so out of their reach. When they don't realize that it is so many levels to it, and obviously there's a beginner level. There's a beginner level to everything. So, yeah, I'm curious about finding out why people have this misconception that you have to be some type of nerd or somebody like you can get into Harvard just to be into the tech space.
Yeah.
When it's for all levels.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Yates, and I'm an agile coach and a scrum master, and I'm also a business coach and mentor with SCORE. I was actually here for the first time yesterday because we had a mentor group in the city of Houston that was doing something in this room. And then I heard about the event while I was here yesterday, and I was like, oh yeah, definitely. I'm just curious, period. I just like to know everything. And, but really, I want to see how I can always take the skills and knowledge that I have and give it back. So that's why I volunteer at SCORE, that's why I volunteer to many spaces, but also because I feel that I'm in education as well. I was like 25 years in higher ed. And so anything to do with training and teaching people and guiding them, and then especially in the STEM area, that's like what I like to do. Like you said, I have people come to me and they think it's so scary to be in tech, but there's so many areas of technology, and with the world changing the way it is, we definitely need to stay on top of what's happening in technology. And that's in all facets, in all verticals, healthcare, in software development, in having to deal with people, AIs, and so yeah, so here I am. Thank you.
Michelle?
Oh, hi everyone. I am Michelle Avalos. Nice to meet you all. I am with Impact Hub Houston as well, co-founder, deputy director. What brings me here? So I don't know the right word for it, but today we're here at a Code for Houston info session, right? But the way I got introduced to Code for Houston was through Open Project Nights in 2018 when I started as a volunteer with Impact Hub Houston. And so the Open Project Nights were the monthly reoccurring, you want to call them like mini hack nights. And I started by helping to organize those. That was my first introduction at anything like hackathon really related. That was a thing. But it was cool because I got to meet such a diverse group of people, but not just like culturally diverse. It was also in terms of like their experience and the industries they were in, and like the things that they cared about, they were passionate about. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the evolution of that today's Code for Houston, is being able to bring people from all walks of life to come together and problem solve together. Yes. So that's why I'm here. Curious about a lot of things, but probably less things than he is more curious about. But I'm just curious about what y'all are interested in, and then how the pieces fit together so that we can build stronger and more sustainable solutions for Houston. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Akil Bernard. I'm the community catalyst for the Impact Hub Houston. For who? Impact Hub Houston.
Yeah.
I'm actually the third member. Impact Hub Houston. But I'm extremely excited to be here. This is actually my first Code for Houston event. I'm sure there will be a lot more. Apart from being the community catalyst at the Impact Hub, I'm actually a coach myself. I do coaching, and I'm also a certified Scrum Master. It's where we're connecting to just kind of talk about tech and the advancement of tech and adding relationships to it. Yeah, at the same time, I would love to be part of that. So that's me here. And then if you have any questions about the Impact Hub, I'm your guy now. So come find me. Nice to meet you.
Randy. Yeah, we're going through, who are you? What brings you here? What are you
I
curious
missed one. What am I curious about? All
Yes.
of you. Hello. How are you? I am.
Who are you?
Who are you? Who are you?
Yes.
I can't read. Who are you? My name is Randy. And I'll cross my arm. I don't want to hear negative right off the start. She's taking a picture of me up there.
Okay, I'll take it again.
I'll be open to you. What brings you here? Well, GM Center, right? And I've been at this for a little while with Code for Chicago, Code for America, all those folks. So, and then what am I curious about? Well, usually just about everything.
Well, thank you very much, Randy. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then Anne?
Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Nguyen. I am also a member of Impact Hub Houston and on the marketing team as well. And this is my very first time here in the space and at a Code for Houston info session. I've joined a couple of the open project nights online when we were doing it virtually. What brings me here, very similar to Simi and Legine, anything that Grace is involved in, I want to be involved in, right? Like, she's phenomenal. And I truly just want to learn what's going on and how I can support it. I appreciate beautiful tech, great tech. I don't know how to code, nor do I want to learn how to code. So I don't really need to know about the plumbing, but I definitely can appreciate tech and how it works and how it can benefit our community.
How to flush the toilet.
Yeah.
That's all I need to know.
I just want to see the water come out. I don't need to know the pipes.
And then, yes, so who are you? What brings you here? And what are you curious about?
My name is Alex Anthony. What brings me here? Just curious to see what I can do to help. As far as like any kind of civic issues, or just apply what knowledge I have to any type of civic issues.
Are you in government or politics, or what is your background? Okay. Just tell me. Okay.
So yeah, I'm just curious about what y'all do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thanks everybody. This is like, my cheeks are starting to hurt from smiling so hard because this is exactly the kind of community that I've been dreaming about. It's like the exact opposite of what I used to see at Station, right? Looking at you all and hearing you say that I'm a Scrum Master, I know Agile, I know how to code. I come from a background, I guess, in the startup world, or like the earlier tech ecosystem, where people would look at you and not assume that off the bat, right? And also to see the allies, and Kurt, Randy, thank you also for being here. You might hear sometimes I'll talk about older white men, who have always had the power or the decision-making leverage within our ecosystem.
I got no power.
Well, I'm sure you have some power in some way. And we all do, right?
But I'm not responsible for the rest of it.
And I'm not white.
So we have something to tell you, said I'm not responsible for the rest of it.
Yeah.
You just said.
It's always and I was gonna say, Randy, I first met Randy about maybe 20 years ago when I was working for Gordon Kwan at City Council, and I remember Randy coming up when they had pop off, and you would just talk about the community and try to support the community in some way. So really appreciate allyship. It moves into who we are as Impact Hub Houston. Some of you said that you're curious about who we are and what we do. We are people who are taking collective action for a better world, or collaborative action for a better world. And I'll read this for you if you can't see it. Our mission is to pioneer a just and sustainable world where business and profit are used in service of people and planet. And this is directly from our global network. The time to act is now, and the way to act powerfully is together. And we really believe this. It's one of the reasons why Michelle and I took serious pay cuts and worked for free the first year, right? Is we want to make this community happen. And we work to support any kind of entrepreneurial solutions. We say entrepreneurial because you don't have to be starting a business. You can be starting a nonprofit or a project in your community, but anything that is in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and it's basically anything that's good for people or planet. There are over 104 locations around the world now, and that needs to be updated in over 64 countries. We actually have over 24,000 members. We're going for a global gathering this week, which is virtual, so those numbers are going to be updated. And we just support change makers at scale. And the way we do that is by growing entrepreneurial communities. One of the things that we have evolved into in terms of Impact Hub Houston is developing more of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So we are the facilitators and fiscal sponsors for the Business Ecosystem Alliance for Minorities and Women. We're helping with the launch and development of the Texas Sustainable Business Network, which is connecting sustainable businesses and helping businesses develop more sustainable practices across the entire state. And a few other projects, including the development of the Black Innovation Corridor across the South Side and Sunnyside areas of Houston, and put in the Impacto, which we'll have a meeting next week to it's ecosystem development to support Hispanic and Latino entrepreneurs. And so then we're also developing a global pipeline of impactful entrepreneurial innovations and connecting that kind of innovation with corporate and institutional innovation and opportunities. What that means is basically if you have a solution and it would benefit by connecting you with a potential client or a pilot project in some area where you'd be able to deploy that solution at scale, we want to make sure that you have that opportunity. We also deliver scaling infrastructure for impact entrepreneurs, which means if you find yourself in Accra, Ghana, for instance, you'll find an Impact Hub community there that can help you. So we can help you at scale in geography. We also can help you at scale in terms of having other Impact Hubs within our network that have incubator and accelerator programs with mentors and investors, including ours, that can help you make sure that you have access to resources to help you grow. And then really we want to catalyze a broad movement of impact. Our goal is to reach 100 million impact makers by 2030 and making sure that we have a lot of people within our network who are similarly aligned, so you know that you're not working alone, that you have people you can lean on for support and that you can collaborate with, and that we can all also actively influence policy to make sure that the policies are matching the kind of impact that we want to create in our communities. So with all of that, this emergent strategy comes from Code for America. And last year they had Brigade Congress. I just came back from the Code for America Summit a few weeks ago. And this idea of an emergent strategy is that it's based on the work of Adrienne Marie Brown, who's an organizer and social justice facilitator. And the idea is that change is constant. You know, the world is in constant flux. It's constantly changing, developing. There's a lot of crisis, and we always seems like we have something major happening in Houston every year. So how do we get ourselves in the right relationship with change, recognizing that change is the fundamental constant in the world that we all live in, and how do we develop systems and processes to make sure that our communities are resilient as well? So this idea of an emergent strategy is that we need to work to ensure that the community is well represented in the planning, the design, and implementation of civic tech. And that includes encouraging participation from women, minorities, and traditionally marginalized groups. And why is this approach more effective or successful, I guess, from the Code for America's experience, It's that it's rooted in social justice organizing, and it engages advocates for civic innovation, and it centers our most marginalized communities. So the idea isn't that we are going to solve these problems for you. We actually want to hear from you. We want to solve with you. This idea of bioinformatics technology is basically looking at natural systems and how things develop and iterate and change and evolve alongside with those problems, because the problems will always change as well, and making sure that our technology and our solutions are just as resilient. And then distributed governance. So this idea of avoiding a specific anti-pattern that will limit the growth of our work. So the idea is that it's not top-down, it is distributed. And even in that distributed framework, you might have some hierarchical frameworks or systems that work for that community, but they might not work for another community. So figuring out what kind of governance works for you in your context, and that's how it's distributed. So how does change happen? We change through intention. We have 3 pillars at Impact Hub Houston: inclusion, intentionality, and internationality. I guess we say we're inclusive, intentional, and international. And the idea is that it's not just change for change's sake, and the belief that moving forward is always progress, but having really deep thought in what we do and how we do it. And so where we're going through the rest of this emergent strategy slides, a little framing with some big ideas, some basics on direct democracy. Actually, I'm going to skip that. Tools for day-to-day egalitarian organizing, and then discussion. So I really want to hear more from you in that spirit of distributed democracy. So a little framing. There are some ideas in this. I will share this deck with everybody afterwards too. So I'm sorry if I'm speaking through some things. But why question our approaches? A lot of the questioning of the approach for Code for America in general came from a lot of the different brigades, sharing that many people are just coming to improve their coding skills. So why do we need to do more? If more people know how to code, that's good enough. And that wasn't good enough for the Code for America community. Equity issues and leadership become stuck, so that you have people who are participating in different Code for America brigades, where it became a boys club. I mentioned kind of the culture, alluded to the culture in the startup ecosystem earlier, where it's just a lot of it's male dominated basically. Not many women were in the tech space just a few years ago. Still kind of today. And then there were 1 or 2 people doing all of the work or making the decisions. So again, like a top-down hierarchy. And so thinking about what kind of challenges do we experience in our own groups, it's one of the things that I do want to hear from you. So sorry if I'm talking too fast. If you want me to go over anything else, please stop me. I don't want this to be just a one-way talk. So Nancy Chateau is talking about different organizational models. How can we do hybrid decision-making in terms of making sure that it is distributed, ownership and control is distributed. So they encouraged us as a brigade to think about how do our members also become or act as brigade leaders, and how does our brigade also act as a leader within the national ecosystem of Code for America? And how do we make sure that works by disrupting this tyranny of structurelessness? Because in the past, people have thought, well, you bring everybody together, that's democracy, right? Everybody has a seat at the table. But that hasn't borne true in a lot of situations, because the elitism becomes institutionalized. So thinking about even access to this building, for instance, I could say, well, it was easy for me to access it. I could somebody dropped me off at the door, and I was able to come into the building, and the guard let me up, right? For somebody who doesn't have a car, or who is not sighted, or doesn't know where this building is, might not even have access to public transportation. What are all of these different accessibility challenges where I'm not realizing that I'm privileged over other people, and having to make sure that we're balancing for that. When you bring a lot of people together without structure, you might also encounter cults of personality, where some people, dominant voices in the room, tend to just steer everything in that direction. Or people who are perceived as authorities in the room tend to steer things in a certain direction. And then some other people will find that, well, why is that person always getting the stage? I want the stage. And then you start to get a lot of conflict, and it becomes power struggles versus let's focus on the solutions. And then this fog. So if you can't read this, I'll read it. The other women drift out of the movement entirely because they don't want to develop an individual project and found that they have no way of discovering, joining, or starting group projects that interest them. And this is something I experienced, and I saw a lot of other people, not just women, but people from marginalized populations experience that. You show up, and then everybody else is talking, or you have a clique, people that know each other, or they get along, they found a way to connect. And it's not that they are trying to be exclusive, but it feels like they've got their thing going. I'm comfortable right here. And it's incumbent upon both parties to like say, it's okay, like I need to introduce myself, and on them to say that person is standing by themselves, we need to include them. So how do we develop a culture where there's much more clarity around how we engage each other, how we work together, where there are opportunities to work together. And so they have 7 principles of democratic structuring. Hey, hi, how are you? Some principles. Are you still doing WordPress stuff this week?
I'm still organizer for the meetup.
Okay. So I was going to introduce you to Natalia, who is an event, doing events for WordPress as well. So anyway, principles of democratic structuring: delegation of specific authority to specific individuals for specific tasks by democratic procedures. So the idea of that, if something needs to get done, somebody needs to be responsible for doing it. Requiring all those to whom authority has been delegated to be responsible to all of those who have selected them. So if I say that I'm going to make sure that there is an Airtable with all of the volunteers on there and a way for people to volunteer for different tasks, then I need to know that I'm responsible to all of you for having committed that, and I need to be able to deliver it, right? So we are responsible to those who have selected that, us, I guess, to do specific tasks. The third principle is distribution of authority among as many people as is reasonably possible. So once we get to 1,000 people, it's going to be very challenging to distribute authority to that many people. But in subgroups or subcommittees or project groups, how do we make sure that everybody has some authority and responsibility within those groups? Rotation of tasks among individuals. So I won't, assume that Akil is going to take care of food all the time, right? We have to make sure that we are allocating tasks or rotating tasks so that no one person always bears the burden of doing the thing that needs to be done every single time, especially since everybody's a volunteer. Allocation of tasks along rational criteria. That idea is making sure that the person who has the responsibility of doing something also can do the thing, whether that's skill, resource, etc. Diffusion of information to everyone as frequently as possible, so making sure that we have transparency in place and that everybody knows what is going on, so at least so people can make better decisions and can pitch in when necessary and when possible. And then making sure that there's equal access to resources needed by the group. And for those who arrived late, we're going through this Emergent Strategy workshop that Code for America provided for us. And so the tools for day-to-day egalitarian organizing, the most powerful tool is the one-to-one. So if you can meet with a person and tell them the story and engage them, that is the best way to develop that relationship and trust so that you can have distributed democracy. It's easier for me to say, Akil, I trust you to open the door and to make sure everybody gets access to this building because we have a relationship now, right? Versus like somebody who just walked in the door that I don't know, right? So this one-to-one relationship development is the most powerful tool for distributed democracy. And the second most powerful tool is just having very clear call to action. So they gave the example of, if you see value in this work, you have a responsibility to ensure it gets done and succeeds. And if you if you do not see value in this work, we should be talking about why that is and should we make changes. So having a clear call to action for the projects that we want to tackle and the priorities that we have. And then be conscious and intentional around shifting power dynamics. So there's especially after the murder of George Floyd a couple years ago, a lot of discussion and talk and funding for diversity, equity, inclusion work. And a lot of times people who are getting the funding or who are saying that they want to do that work are not asking themselves these questions, right? Does your leadership all look the same? Do they all work the same? Are they coming from different backgrounds? Because people from different backgrounds obviously have different perspectives and different things that they can contribute. But if they are from a smaller or marginalized group, they may not be heard. So a lot of times we have to look at the room and see who is not here. So for instance, I know that in our work at Impact Hub Houston, we don't have enough or anybody that I recognize as from Indigenous communities. So how do we reach out to people from Indigenous communities and make sure that they are included, at least have a voice in what we do? And from the LGBTQ community. Then in terms of DEI, a code of conduct is necessary but not sufficient. So we do have a code of conduct, but obviously we need to make sure that we create a culture, because I think a culture is what reinforces that code. And then we need to make sure that we have bottom-up power building. Again, this idea of grassroots, making sure everybody has a seat and a say and it is heard. And then this idea of caucusing, let's see. So they were talking about helping amplify non-dominant groups and ideas, and how do you get, again, inclusion at the table and real empowerment. And then also helping those different groups and people who are participating in solutions development, understanding where their role is. So I mentioned earlier that at Impact Hub, we've started doing a lot more ecosystem development, and that is because a lot of organizations have historically seen themselves as competing, right? They're competing for the same $5,000 to $25,000 sponsorships from corporations. And what we've done is taken a step back and seen there's $200 to $200 million going to ecosystems, to groups of organizations that are working together to solve something. And a good example of that is the Coalition for the Homeless. So if you haven't heard about this, there's a recent article in the New York Times about how Houston has placed 25,000 people who are unhoused now in housing, right? And that is through the good work of the Coalition for the Homeless, where they found a lot of different organizations to be able to identify where they are best, where they work best, identify those roles, see where there are gaps, make sure they find more organizations or find ways to fill those gaps. And now you have people who are addressing addiction, mental health issues, childcare, programs to get to work, so talent upskilling, etc. And so there's a cohesive effort to make sure that people stay housed. And I believe that the number 87% comes to mind. We just saw a presentation on it, but the majority of people who have been housed, the Coalition for the Homeless, have stayed housed within 2 years, as of a couple weeks ago. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Why do caucuses help amplify non-dominant groups? I think of caucuses as like people and meetings and talking. So is there something special about caucus?
Caucus is a way of just saying groups, right? So the idea that you have people from in different groups. So if you think of government, and because Code for America works directly with government, right? They think of like the Black Caucus, the Refugee Caucus, right? There's usually just a group of people who care about a specific group of people or a specific issue, and then making sure.
Caucuses on specific issues. Because I think of like the Iowa caucuses, and I don't see that as amplifying non-dominant groups.
Well, I guess it depends on who's part of the caucuses, right? So if there are people in rural areas, for instance, who normally don't get a say because usually maybe Boise says whatever happens for the rest of the state, then those are non-dominant voices.
So it's issue caucuses.
Yeah, it can be issue, just underrepresented people. So they have this whole graphic, but cooperative communication, the rescue dynamic. I guess the takeaway from this is cooperative communication is like a Venn diagram where we overlap, we can relate and build together. And this kind of lends to the idea of Code for America and Code for Houston Brigade is really about solutions development and how can we focus on solving a problem versus getting into the politics of something. A lot of words. I think I think like the thing that stuck with me is like this idea of no secrets, no lies, no rescues, no power plays. So what they mean by no rescues is the idea of like, I'm doing this for you. Like you guys, this one thing I hear about, I'll say this from experience, is that the 3rd ward needs help. The 5th ward needs help. So we're gonna go out to that community and provide solutions for them. Where it's like, no, actually, they're solving the problems themselves. What they need is some resources. You know, they don't need you. They need resources so they can continue doing the work and scale the work and make it more. Yeah. Anyway, so that idea of that we're not here to rescue you. We're here to empower and to work with and listen to, etc. Right? So it's interesting with this idea. This cooperative communication restores a healthy balance of power, asking for 100% of what you want 100% of the time, and negotiate to agreement. So that is really saying that this is what I want, and then what are the things that you are immovable on. But everybody has a lot of things that they want that will not completely 100% align with all the things that I want. But where can we start to negotiate? Where's that give and take so that we get to a point of where we can actually solve an issue? Luigi and I were talking about women's health, right? And the topic of abortion. And when are you even address that? But it's like, for me, I was saying, well, how do we approach this from women's health care? And how do you make sure the woman is taken care of? And, you know, and once you go to that, all the storytelling and, you know, then you become more empathetic, you understand how complex the issue is for women. And maybe you can get to a place where there is some point of agreement. Maybe you don't, but at least you know where you start from. And then if you're completely honest, again, no secrets, no lies, no power plays. No, I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right and you're wrong. I just want to see where can we actually get to common ground. It's interesting. They also say break a cycle and set boundaries. Notice when you're getting cranky and frustrated because yeah, I know I do that. Anger helps us remember or realize what our needs and boundaries are. So use the frustration energy to say stop. It's time to think. We've done hackathons where somebody is like saying, no, you were wrong and I am right and you need to acknowledge that I'm right. But it's like at that point, yeah, it's good to take a beer break or something. Yeah. So that's just like all the words is basically some recommendations on making sure that you think. Oops. Okay. Thinking about context, quick decisions versus big decisions. I think just to speak through all of these words, the idea of that public reporting of votes is important because when people know that their votes or what they're planning on doing, sorry, my shoes are farting, that they have to be much more thoughtful in what they do, right? The idea that people are going to see this, I need to make sure that that there's data backed and there's thought into this. So I'm advocating against quick decisions versus big decisions. And what can we do to protect the collective interest? Having clear info, having outside sources of support, name domineering behavior. So whenever somebody is not being polite or somebody's not being inclusive, somebody is, or somebody's being intimidating or harassing, making sure that it is said to somebody so that you have an ally and that it can also be addressed. And this is not to be overly Karening, right? Like not to be over saying, like policing every single word that somebody does. I would recommend that being compassionate, kind, respectful, even-handed is obviously always helpful, but also being honest is very helpful. I think there's a good balance between being compassionate and kind and being honest, and that like conveys into kindness versus being nice. I'm not into being nice, I'm so scratchy. Yeah, being kind. Like I care about you. I want you to know you're being an asshole. Sorry?
I like practice.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
So in some elements of this emergent strategy is that when you go out in fractals, right, everything just becomes a kind of a smaller version of this bigger thing. And in the aggregate, there's big change, there's big movement. You've heard that saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Well, if you want to go far, fast, then go together with strategy. It's not what it says. That's what I think. Thank you. And so this is time for discussion. So any thoughts on that so far? And if this is like, this isn't what I was expecting, but please feel free to start with that as well. Any thoughts or questions so far?
I mean, it wasn't what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like all about coding. So I see how coding is incorporated in that. So I like the approach.
Yeah, thank you for that. like, I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to think about in terms of, do we keep it, calling it Code for Houston, or do we change what code stands for? Could it be culture code? Like, could it be like language code? Is there another way of thinking about Code for Houston? Because to what you were saying earlier, that you want to make sure it's not just people who are developers or who come from the tech space. We want to make sure more people who are in the civic space or communities also feel welcome. Like, if it were just coders, then I wouldn't have Michelle, right? It was somebody who wants to do good in their community. So, thanks for sharing. Any other thoughts or questions?
Where are we getting the challenges or set of problems from? Is that from this community, or are we going out?
So we'll go into that in a second, a little bit more in a second. Okay, so if nobody else has any questions, or if you do, feel free to just like jump in at some point too. So the revisioning. When Sketch City and Impact Hub Houston merged, right? So the idea was that Jeff Reichman, who was the co-founder of Sketch City, was doing the Houston Hackathon. We were partnering on open project nights. He said, well, you guys have like the bandwidth and the capacity to take on all of this work, because he was getting really busy. So we adopted that, and it started out just with the meetups, the monthly meetups of open project night, of inviting people to share. So there's one part of it where you invite people from different organizations to share what they're working on, what challenges they're facing, and see if anybody from the community, whether they're in tech or not, would be interested in working on those challenges, would be able to provide resources, et cetera, to help them. And then there was an open mic part where anybody can share what they're working on, what kind of problem they're interested in solving, and then see if other people are interested in working on that with them as well. What we're thinking about now, in addition to Open Project Night and the Houston Hackathon and the Climathon, which is a hackathon around climate action, what should Code for Houston be? What can it be? How can it be more inclusive? How can it engage more people in problem solving within the city? And from the Code for America network, what they've shared is that they wanted to have a partnership first strategy. Again, that we're not solving for you, we're solving with you. So who else can we work with? How do we move away from independent, standalone, or isolated technology? How do we focus on community-based partnerships instead of local governments? Because in the past, Code for America Brigades would work directly with the city and see like how can the tech people in our community solve a specific problem, like reimagining 911, for instance, is a big project for America. But not just government now. It's how do we really solve things that are in the community, like homelessness. The second part of the revisioning for Code for America is organizing civic technology talent at scale. So how can we give people an improved and expanded pathway to get involved in civic technology? How can we organize and mobilize people at scale through the brigades? And then finally, practice and refining the how of our work. So in investing in the foundational DNA of democratic experimentation, so along the lines of that emergent strategy, bottom-up solutions, and then practicing that in an open, transparent, iterative, people-centered, and radically inclusive way. And so it goes into kind of what someone was asking about. So the programs, this partnership first strategy goes into some of the programs that Code for America is now spearheading. So how do we shrink the criminal legal system by automating more things, right? So how can you automate record clearance? Because you don't need to have a backlog of cases, of caseload, if you can automate that. And more people would then have clear records and be able to find jobs maybe more easily because the records would be cleared, et cetera, et cetera. So it leads to a lot of more systemic consequences if we could automate record clearance. I don't know if you saw it, but they recently got the Awesome Project Fund from TED to develop a solution for strengthening the social safety net. And so that includes how do you improve access to food assistance and delivery of benefits, so food benefits, integrated benefits applications, so how do you make it easier for people and families to access all of their benefits in one place instead of having to figure out which organization do I need to talk with, where do I need to go. So what is that one stop where they have applications for all of the benefits? Training and capacity building, so how do you help the government serve people in a more human-centered way? If you've ever had to get your license or registration, it might not have been that way. So how do you make that more user-friendly? And then finally, rapid response. So how do you give people the resources they need in times of crisis? And using moments of crisis to create long-term transformation. A really good example of this was when Hurricane Harvey happened. So Station Houston, we were at the Neutrality Building, and it's a NOC, a Network Operations Center, I believe is what it stands for. But because a lot of big companies have their servers there, the building could withstand almost up to 300-mile-per-hour winds. You're sitting on 40,000 plus gallons of fuel underneath to make sure that the building doesn't go down. So since our building was safe, we invited everybody to come. If you needed to work, if you wanted to help develop solutions, we had snacks and beverages. You come to station. And so we had a lot of people come, and they were developing a lot of interesting solutions to help make sure that people had access to shelter, could find where shelters were still open, could get connected with the Cajun Navy to get picked up from their pubs and taken to those shelters, and get for shelters, make sure that they got supplies and resources as they were available. And there were some people who said that if they could have made that a living, they would continue to do that work. If they could get funding, they would continue to do that work. So I feel like that's one thing that Code for Houston can help is how do you create long-term transformation by making sure people who are developing solutions, if they want to, can continue doing that work, or if they find somebody else who would like to, that they can get resources to train that person can then turn that into a livelihood, great jobs, etc. Promoting economic justice through tax benefits. So how do you provide free and trustworthy tax services, help people with tax filing? I feel like Baker Ripley does a really good job with that, but there might be some communities that they don't reach that could be helpful. And then mobilizing this national network. So one thing I want, I have another link to, but I'll just put it here. One thing they're asking more brigades to help promote and help more people apply for is this community fellowship. So they'll give you training over 9 months. I believe it's a paid fellowship. But you would be paired with local government to address inequities in service delivery. So if people are not able to find how to get free tax consulting or how to get benefits that they are qualified for, how can you help local government, whether that's at the city or county, develop solutions for that? So, move on. Any questions so far?
There's a question from online. Remy is asking, he's watching through LinkedIn right now, and he's asking, first, how do I get the slides? And second, how do I become a member of the brigade?
Oh, just join, like sign up on the meetup page and come to events. We haven't started an Airtable for it yet, have we, Michelle? Yeah. So we'll start an Airtable for it and then have a form on the, if you go to codeforhouston.org, we'll add the form there so you can sign up to join the brigade.
What is brigade? I don't quite
Thank
figure
you.
out how-
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. I didn't know that. So a brigade is just the term for the group, right? So if there's no official membership that you have to pay to be part of, you don't have to sign up. The only people who have to be informed as members of the brigade are people who want to lead the brigade. So if you're interested in being a co-leader for the brigade, let me know and I'll be happy to include you in that. And that you would be included on the Slack channel for all of the different brigade leaders around the country. You would just get more responsibility and be responsible for more work, but it would be very much appreciated. And yeah, so I think the brigade is just open to anybody who wants to help develop solutions and work with other people on developing solutions for however they define the community they serve.
What is the Airtable?
An Airtable?
Can we play air hockey on?
Airtable, if you go to airtable.com, Airtable is kind of it's a platform that merges a database with project management, CRM, product management solutions. It's like a Trello and Asana and a Google Sheets merged into one thing. And so that's what we've been using. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's what we've been using since the pandemic to organize a lot of the different programs and projects that we run.
Is it an open source?
I don't
No,
think it's
it's-
open source, yeah, but it has a free
It's
version.
a unicorn. $500 billion now.
Really?
That's very. But about brigades, the scale of brigades is actually quite large. I mean, a few years ago, there were like 32,000 people in brigades across the United States. You don't actually hear about too much for the work of 32,000. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think this year was the first year I heard the term.
Brigade.
When we were getting, I guess, onboarded the brigade for folks. So yes, not many people have heard of that.
Do you know where the term brigade comes from? Yeah, exactly. I think of military.
I've heard of sea brigades and since it's
So what?
I just would say civic, military,
Yeah.
and then
Engagement. Yeah.
I grew up with a sister in Scottish Brigade. I don't know if it's a Scottish term or not. You have to check.
Well, thank you for that. So let's see, organizing civic technology talent scale, the people power. I think that goes. The way they describe it on the Code for America site is that the network is made of technologists, advocates, and organizers who work to break down barriers and help people access services and meet local needs. So again, not just people who are in tech, but also people who are doing a lot of work in their communities. And there are different ways you can join. You can join the brigade, and you can also join the National Action Team, which if you go to the website, you would be able to sign up for that. We applied to be a community of practice, so we'll see how that, we'll keep you abreast of how that develops. And then you can join the discourse. Are you familiar with discourse? If not, it's like Slack, but a lot of gamers use it. It's really popular more in the gaming, or has been in the gaming community, but it's a place where you can connect with other people. If you're not familiar with Slack, it's like threaded conversations within the group. You also have this opportunity now where you can do calls and like Zoom meetings through that, both through Slack and Discourse. The community fellowship I mentioned. Okay, so here's community members of local governments to address inequities in service delivery, and they they're inviting as many people who are interested to apply. Some areas that they've explored: clean water access, housing access, the prison industrial complex, the digital divide, transportation access, and access to public services. And then there's more information on there on the site. If you just go to codeforamerica.com, programs, you'll find the community fellowship. And then the practice and refine the how of our work. So again, like this idea of the process and how Code for America does things, making sure that there's human-centered government, and then policy must be designed for the digital age. So it's kind of like when you're developing tech solutions, mobile first, people first. And that's so fun. So with that in mind, I really want to know how should our brigade look? What should our brigade look like? Not in terms of just the people who are a part of it, but kind of what we stand for. I think there are some communities where they're much more tech startup focused, and there are some communities where it's very much civic activists who are working with government, and they work more on policy and implementation and deployment of solutions that are developed through the Code for America network into those communities. So we can figure out what we want Houston to look like. We can also think about what we want to prioritize over the next year or the next 3 years. Think about what strategies make the most sense for Code for Houston to adopt. So should it stay centralized within Impact Up Houston, or should we have Code for Houston groups, chapters, sub-brigades across the city, so that it's the people who are leading those are within the communities that they're serving. And then, this process is about telling you how to strategize to fit into the National Code for America revision concepts. It's really for us to provide options. We can create it how we want it to be. So, does anybody have any thoughts on that right now? Yes.
I would align it with the SDG goals, break it down, identify Houston's strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, and then
That's where I would start.
Okay, so you're saying, look at which SDGs are relevant for Houston context, and then doing a SWOT analysis for like grouping them together?
Yeah, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are the opportunity, and then we can kind of align, like, they all matter, it's just identifying where to start.
Okay. Are there any SDGs that you would recommend?
I would have to look at it. I'd have to look at it, but that's kind of how I would center it around, a goal, but also identifying where we're at in alignment with those social needs.
I have some comments, more than just a thought.
Okay.
But, okay. Historically, we've had Houston Hackathon, and I've probably been to 4 or 5 of them over the year. And I love going to them because I love to hear people's ideas. So I'm not really that interested in the final presentations of 6 or 7 things. I'm interested in the 1-minute pitches that like 60 people give, and I record them and I take notes. And, that's way too big for the hackathon. But that'd be really interesting to work on, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's a really smart person. I talk to them. Nobody's gonna work on their team. But, So the thing that drove me crazy listening to all those pitches, those 1-minute pitches, was somebody would get up and they would say, I want to do for Houston. I want to do for Houston. And it's like, well, that would work like everywhere. Why did you say for Houston? Why are you doing it just for Houston? And then you look on Code for America's site. What happens to the software? All these brigades, 32,000 people, obviously, and most of them not really doing much. Names on the list. But what has Code for America done? They do all these really fantastic projects for a specific city. They go into, like they did some amazing thing for San Antonio. They have their conferences and they talk about these projects and they get really closely attached to something a team is doing. And then, of course, they put the code out on GitHub and anybody can use it. It never jumps to another city. I'm thinking, has anything ever jumped to a city? I started asking, name something that's jumped to another city. And nobody could tell me. Eventually, the guy who was in charge of the San Francisco Brigade, which was quite active, much more active than Houston, somebody told me, he's having the same idea. He's irritated nothing jumps between cities and it's all this kind of very siloed. And eventually we got on the phone and we're talking and he says, we forgot how to get more stuff that works between cities. And it turns out you have to do probably 3 times as much work to get it to jump between cities. But if you did that work, it could go to 100 cities instead of just Houston or one place.
Would you like to lead on that?
I'm telling you this story here. So here's the story. So I said, well, tell me one of these. Some must have. And he said, yeah, there have been 2 or 3. I said, well, tell me one. Well, in San Francisco, we took the Boston code for what they call adopt-a-hydrant. Did you ever hear about that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's in Boston, they did adopt-a-fire hydrant. Anybody guess why they did adopt a fire hydrant? Why would you want to adopt a fire hydrant in Boston? See, it's hard from a Houston point of view, but in Boston, they get a lot of snow. And your house is burning down, and the fire department has to spend 10 minutes just digging out the fire hydrant to put the fire out. You've got a big problem. Right. So people volunteered to take the snow, keep the snow away from the fire hydrant on their block. And it was really pretty popular. But the guys in Boston were geniuses, because they said, well, we could write this up as adopt a fire hydrant and build fire hydrant in the code everywhere. No, they did the general code. They did adopt a thing. And they called it thing everywhere in the code. And they put in where you could customize it and you could adopt any piece of Civic hardware. So Boston released this code, adopt a thing, and they customized it for fire hydrant. And San Francisco picked it up for storm drains. It turns out in San Francisco, the slope means debris catches in a lot of storm drains and floods local streets.
You have the years?
I'm sorry.
You know the time frame?
Oh, well, 2017, the team I stumbled onto ended up winning one of the 3 Houston Hackathons.
So a dollar per track.
Yeah, so right before Harvey shut down. But so I said, adopt a fire, and I adopt a storm drain. You seem to do that. So the code's just out there. I downloaded the code. I went around and like got 62 storm drains around my house and sample data in the map, and I had like an app going, and I was signing up and on the mobile phone and all that. The code was just ready. It was pretty good. And I was playing with this in like February, and then May rolls around, and the Houston Hackathon happens, and we're demoing it, and for various political reasons, we won, but Houston, of course, didn't use that code. They wanted to do it differently, and they wanted to use their GIS system instead of just a flat file. Anyways, it was and then they had the sex toy. But it got on the news because of naming issues and stuff. So that was but so I started being kind of interested in why is there not a shared base of open source software that cities in America use? That there isn't. Houston's probably like bigger and has special needs, but why aren't all the cities the size of like Conroe or Stafford sharing open source software instead of like buying these lousy 311 solutions for outrageous amounts of money? And while that's happening, by the way, at that Houston Hackathon, there was a uniformed police officer there, and he was on a team. I don't know if you remember that one, but they actually were one of the winners too.
That was 2 years before that.
No, this was.
The uniform police was in 2015. I was on that team.
Okay, but the point was that he was there because they wanted some interface to their mobile app or
They
something.
wanted a simple interface instead of the massive interface that the Houston Police Department.
Right. And so, I think were one of the winners that year?
Yeah.
Right. And then, like 3 months later, they show up again at a monthly meeting of the brigade, and they're asking for sort of the same thing.
Well, because the
something didn't work
guy
out.
from Blinds, we all sat around. We said it's too, and they all said it's too big for hackathon. I said we can do it. It's just a directory. Just create a directory. This guy from Blinds.com went over the corner and did it, and then he copyrighted it.
Oh, you're joking.
Oh no, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah,
But anyway,
and then I've rewritten it since then. So
but see, here's the thing. So I'm getting interested in why isn't there a uniform layer of open source software and all? And then the Houston Police Department shows up twice to ask for like free code. And then I said, well, how big is their budget? Well, you know that the Houston Police Department has a bigger IT budget than the city of Houston. I mean, they have bigger problems in IT. But their budget overall, back then it was $850 million. Right. And they're asking for us to write free software. What? So, and it was going to be like, it wasn't, they were asking for the like uniform layer that everybody can use. They were asking for something specifically for Houston. You're crazy.
that was public relations.
So what would you like to see happen?
Well, ideally it would be any project we start on, determine like 2 other cities that think that's an important project and want to collaborate from the start. So we get a base that at least like 3 cities are using to start with. By definition, it'd jump to cities, and we don't have to like push it on people, or they have to reverse engineer and take out the Houston specific parts. So
this is why I'm
and that
asking
would
if you'd
like
to lead.
revolutionize like the whole open source civic software thing, because people don't do that.
Well, and they are doing it, but they're not doing it in spaces that other people know about, right? So this is why I'm asking if you would like to lead that, because if you would get access to the Slack, the Code for America Slack, you could see Boston, the Bay Area are collaborating on some stuff.
These Slacks and stuff I think are new, because it used to be everybody was kind of dissociated.
Yeah, exactly.
There was like a general mailing list, but it wasn't like the social.
Yeah, peer-to-peer.
There was a Slack in 2012.
I didn't know about it.
Well,
Yeah.
because I was with Code for America in Chicago.
Yeah, that's right.
In 2012. So So that's where I knew.
I would ask my question, what is jump between
Was through
cities?
Chris. And one of the projects up there is Purple. Purple in Chicago has sort of jumped from gone to other. Ballad of Media
Oh, yeah.
is a project that had another name in Chicago and did other things in Chicago. So these projects sometimes start and then people move and reinvent the wheel and sort of thing. And the Harvey thing, you know, when Niraj and Jeff and everybody was, when we built what was built there were two things built. There was one thing built that jumped over to Florida for a while
Yeah.
because Florida got hit by that for us. And so that jumped over to Florida and they used it. And in Miami. And then, but then the other thing kind of went off into another room and became the thing that's a volunteer in Ukraine now.
Yeah.
No,
Progress.
the people that were volunteering, the Houston-based volunteers, the platform is being used, and a lot of people from Houston and from other places that have signed up with
So it
that
does jump.
Harvey relief stuff.
But it takes being engaged, like it takes people being active and looking out for that. And so I'd say if what my takeaway is from that is one of the things we should prioritize is better connectivity and helping people understand how they can work together, or like connecting the dots proactively versus just expecting you guys to know something and then do the research on your own, right? So if we have active eyes in these communities, then we can see where there are points where we collaborate with other brigades. So if you're up for it, I'd be super happy. At least you have access to the Slack. Well, see, that's the thing. You know, kind of the frustration is that there aren't enough people who have enough time. But a little bit of it, you know, if you find something, at least you can alert us, and then we can find other people to help. So some of the, two of the other people who are part of the brigade leadership who are not here right now, Daryl Malone, which I know some of you already know, leading up the National Police Data Coalition. His background is in blockchain. His mom actually leads the Women Business Enterprise Association. But anyway, so he's very much, you know, into how do you develop more solutions at the intersection of technology and civic engagement. And then Katya, I can't pronounce her last name, but she has developed a website for civic information, like how do you share, provide more transparency from the government. She has a long background in working with different governments, different cities. And I forgot to create a slide for them, but I will include that too. So we're looking for more leadership, right? And the idea is that with more shared leadership, like we were talking about this emergent strategy, the less, you know, of work there has to be for one single person, and then we can support each other. So, you know, you find, hey, Miami's doing something really interesting. Let's talk with them because the next hurricane is coming up. Grace, do you know somebody, or can you reach out to somebody? I might not, but I can ask Daryl, you know, and so we can find within ourselves so it doesn't get dropped. Because I agree, like I hate seeing really good projects come out from these hackathons and then they just fade away and don't get support that they need to continue going, because they could save the next community from a similar crisis. Would that be helpful to address that?
Are we going to do agile type things?
Well, yeah, we have a couple Scrum and Agile experts. Yeah.
Wait, careful there.
Yeah.
But you all works.
Yeah, we could totally do it. I've already asked her for dates. We could do something.
I just
I guess I just want to hear what the people want
exactly.
who are in the room.
Yeah, I just for the sake of time, because it's 6:40, and so I'd also like to leave space for those of you that are brand new to this as well, to please share what your thoughts are and what would you like to see in this reunited cookies.
I'd love to see a contact list of the people in this room.
Contact list. Okay.
You know, if everybody's
Michelle, are
willing
you
to share
taking
their
notes?
information.
Thank you so much. Thank you. A contact list. And how much information would you like people to share? Like a link to their LinkedIn, or if they're comfortable sharing that?
You know, their name and
Right. Is there
the people that were here at least.
There,
I mean,
we have a meetup group, right? And a lot of people have subscribed to that, but not everybody is active. Like as Lester was saying, there's a lot of names on this. Code for Houston.
Oh, for Houston.
But we were thinking about moving away from Meetup because not many people check it. You know, it's not just a popular social media network anymore. But at least if we can create a Slack, maybe, or we had sort of discourse during one of the hackathons, we just haven't kept it active. So that would be one thing, is to make sure that we keep some kind of online community active. If we get everybody into the Code for America Slack, I don't know if it's open to everybody, but if we can get everybody as part of the brigade, at least onto the Code for America Slack, then you can continue to connect with each other and also with the national network. So, you know.
Well, really dumb question, but in the last year in Houston, is there one brigade or 20 brigades?
There's only one brigade.
There's one brigade.
Yeah, they only provide the license to one group, one organizer. Actually, one organizer. So I have the license for the Code for America Brigade. Yeah, so you can.
Could have theirs if they wanted. There.
Sorry.
Katie could have theirs.
Yeah, exactly.
West University could have
Carolina, every community. I mean, that's what one of the reasons why I'm asking about what is the most sensible strategy for us to adopt. Because if more people want to do like a Code for Houston in West U or in Edo, by all means lead it. But then whoever is leading that just needs to be part of the central Code for Houston thing. So when we report back to Code for America, that's fine. Or if you want to apply for a chapter for within your community, I'm definitely not possessive about it. I want more people to lead it. In fact, I would prefer somebody to be leading it than me.
How many people are in the brigade
Here
Houston?
in Houston, on the meetup, it's over
Just
3,000.
520.
Over 3,000 people are part of the group. Yeah.
3,000 people.
Oh, that
yes.
sounds like, that sounds like a sketch.
I haven't seen all
I
3,000,
think
but
we're at
they're there.
3,500.
Yeah.
You're the few, the crowd.
So at the last in-person hackathon that was at Buchanan, there were a couple hundred people who showed up to participate. But since the pandemic, kind of activity has quieted.
Yeah, I missed the beginning. Is Houston Hackathon
Happening again? We are planning for it, yeah, in September for the National Civic Day of Action.
Did you participate online?
No.
I would-
Online. There was.
Sorry,
I
someone.
know there was. Yes.
I would love some kind of list of like roles or positions and things that can be worked on and
Awesome.
resources for like what skill sets are needed or what needs to be developed to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Just like a really great place to start is what are we doing? And what do we need to know to do it?
Responsibilities. Yeah.
And we're at work with. It's
Well,
great thinking about ideas and how we can make this bigger or better, but like you don't have the base.
yeah. So I think that going to the directory, if once we revitalize that, so let's say if we set it up on Airtable, we ask everybody to update your information, and then we can also ask for interests. You know, what kind of functional role are you interested in? Whether that's outreach, development, design, whatever it is, working on the hackathon, and or what kind of projects and themes you're interested in, aligning with the SDGs. You know, so then we can start to match people and figure out where people fit. But we'll also put out which roles, I guess, we need. But I mean, honestly, it's also, we can do both. We can say that we would love somebody to do a few people for community engagement, outreach, a few people to work on each hackathon. So a group for Houston Hackathon, a group for the Climathon, a group that could help lead the monthly open project nights, you know, in tandem with Daryl and Katya and Akil. And then if there's something else that you'd like to see happen, like if you'd like to see us to work on very specific solution, like reimagining 311, for instance, right? How can 311 actually be more effective for Houston? Then let's see how we can rally both city, county, different private companies, different institutions to actually put a robust team together to tackle that one project, right? So if you have ideas on something like that too, we can also rally people around that. Yeah, so there's just a lot of different things that can be done. Yeah, I think okay, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking out loud at this point, but we'll definitely do the functional ones. If you have any project ones, let us know. We can put that call out as well.
We had a comment on Facebook asking about roadmaps for IT jobs or shareable information about the jobs or requirements from companies.
For jobs?
Jobs, yes.
Yeah,
it says
we
IT.
have a great partner with one of our board members, Eric Ibarra, who is behind HTX Talent. So if they're looking for jobs in the tech space, go to htxtalent.com. So, yeah, there's so many startups and larger companies that post their tech jobs there.
Well, mine's kind of like a comment on like the marketing and branding. So I was under the impression that code was only for people that know how to code because it's under the name. But now after listening to the presentation, it seems that this organization would really benefit from like people that pride themselves on thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Or like building outside the box. So that even that don't know how to code, right? But they'd be integral to the team with people that know how to develop a tech solution for something. So like myself, I don't know how to code, but I pride myself on thinking outside the box and being able to put, well, if you know how to do this and you know how to do this, we can like develop this solution. So maybe even, so I do volunteer to help out in this, in developing marketing collaterals that share, that calls for those. Do you pride yourself on thinking outside the box? If so, come to this event. We're trying to change the city of Houston for the better. We're going to put you into teams that are trying to find solutions, and you'll get to exercise that skill that you have for the betterment of the community.
Yeah.
Because I was under the impression that it was, you had to learn how to, you had to know how to code. You do.
Well, you
I don't know how to code.
And then others are, though coders will learn about marketing.
Yes.
And then you'll bring
I try
their
to coach everybody.
Yes. You do.
And design, yeah. Thank you. I like that campaign idea already. Like build outside the box, think outside the box, solve outside the box.
But there is a lot of marketing. Code for Houston, I mean, it is big. I mean, Code for America is big. How do we do that and still be branded as code as this big thing that is useful to us?
I think it still aligns if you're talking about building or solving or thinking outside the box. The idea is solving problems for your community, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying that we don't want to go renaming ourselves.
Oh yeah, it's not
I
renaming
think
the.
for him,
Brand-
his
branding
skill's
and
gonna get adoption.
Branding and renaming.
Getting
might be
adoption.
different.
It sounded like what you were saying is that we have all these great projects and solutions that don't really get traction and aren't fully being used. I don't know what the adoption rate is being implemented in the community. But it sounds, it's not just, let's get people to join, but if we're going to spend the time doing this, what is our adoption rate and what is our success rate? I mean, that would be something,
I'm interpreting adoption as engagement. So right, they're engaging in producing it. Any other comments?
I'd like to see there's ongoing projects. It's like this is like if there's ongoing projects and there's like with contact or ways to contribute. Like in my head, I'm like, okay, I don't have enough time to like stare at something that like what I'm going to contribute. Or like I just want to
Local programs or national programs?
What was that?
Local programs or national programs?
I guess either.
Either.
I don't know. I just want to. I'm a programmer, so it's like I just want to be able to go and make a branch, make a pull request, and then just contribute. But I can't.
Do you have?
Well, yeah, we did have a GitHub that was
Yeah.
through Sketch City where they had a lot of projects.
I think I followed Sketch City a little while. Yeah, I thought they had something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like hundreds.
But I've never gone to Sketch City stuff. It was like my first time.
Yeah. Well, it's worth rebooting. So talking to Jeff and seeing which projects have the most promise, and Randy and Lester, you might know this already. Which projects should we continue like keeping alive and reactivating maybe that are in the repo?
There are also the websites from the old Houston Hackathon where you can see what people work on. At least
I think
they got to an end
Yeah,
point.
we have posted there.
I don't know if
as well.
it's still there.
So there's also an ask for where are these things, and there are some historical things. So maybe one project is on our Climathon Houston website. Who wants to pull all these historical resources and then help us create that, go see everything here on the Code for Houston. So that at least the links are all on the page. That's definitely something we need.
One person knows all the links. I'm willing to commit some part of that.
Or if you just pull it in a document, whatever you do have, email it over, and then you pull all those into one page.
Yeah, or we could add it to like a specific Code for Houston.
Because I think I've said that all sketch cities.
Yeah, it's still there, so just pull it up. If you look up, if you go on GitHub
Their
and look for
GitHub's still
Sketch
there?
City, project ideas, issues,
Yeah.
that's still live.
And then if you go to Dev Post and you go to City of Houston Hackathon,
Yeah, that's still there too.
you should be able to see 2013 through 2018.
Can we get a list of these resources?
Yes.
You know, that's what we're doing right now is putting together the list.
So we
I'm
have,
just putting the whole list together.
we have
Yeah,
a few, if you look at, go to devpost.com there and look up Houston Hackathon, there are a few of the hackathons that are still live.
What are you saying, Dev Post?
DEVPOST.com, like developer post. It's
What
a,
is that?
it's a place where people, different organizations can host their hackathons. So you can have people sign up, publish their projects there, have it voted on, and provide prizes.
And see, we used to have great graphics too. Evan O'Neill, not O'Neill, yeah,
Yeah.
Evan O'Neill does
We
great
need to get
graphics.
Evan involved again. Well, that's another thing, like getting the design community involved as well. Anything else? Yes.
Actually, I missed the first part of the presentation, so you already I'm trying to understand this benefit. And even if you download pretty good codes, pretty good applications, if there is no real life application, I mean, it's for nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, there are, as you said, there are hundreds of good projects in that GitHub page. I've seen a few months ago, and some parts are good, some parts already finished, but nobody is currently using it. I mean, we can develop some projects, we can bring some ideas, we can work on them, and we can finish them. But let's say we develop something for homeless people, for the Houston. But if the city of Houston doesn't support that, or if the city of Houston doesn't accept that, it's for nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are going to work for nothing.
Yeah.
So who will who will contact with those guys? Who will find out which project is the best one or the first one? I mean, city may be ready for some solutions, but we may want to work on other solutions.
Yeah.
I mean, if something happens like that, who will guide us? Who will lead us? And at the end of the day, we are going to create something useful.
So in the earlier part of the conversation, or the Emergent Strategy session, what the network is moving away from is it everything being government-centered for that exact problem, right? Because we've experienced that from so many hackathons where the city then meets with the top three and then nothing is adopted and no resources are put behind it. So I think the solution for that is to make sure that we're working with organizations and public and private stakeholders and making sure that there are resources committed so that if somebody develops something and they want to continue with it, they do have resources committed to continue working on it or working on that. But it's not just to solve, I think what we're moving away from is creating solutions that are just fun or that, are for a hackathon challenge versus making sure that we're working with an organization that really needs something and then making sure the resources to support a solution for that issue and then connecting the hackathon or the efforts with that so it continues to go. Because I agree, I really don't want people's time and intellects being wasted.
And I sort of want to say, as someone who's put forth a lot of effort on programming things that are not adopted, but it showed the way for other people. I mean, I we write things, and then somebody, and then me, I write purely in open source. I do not write in real like program real one. So I write things, I build websites, and I go to meetings and I present what I've done, and the police department sitting over in the corner, they're going, I don't like those colors. That IT department, I go, oh, can you make the logo bigger? Oh, he's with the IT department, I know what he's thinking. And they go off and they write their own thing, which is perfectly all right with me because I'm not making the change, not producing a piece of software.
I think the solution for that, one thing we need to incorporate in any of the activities we do is that to make sure that there are resources committed that we actually can control versus like pledges, right? So the city of Houston has pledged before that we could adopt this, but they didn't commit to adopting it. Like they didn't say we're going to put $35,000 into that, right? So there needs to be much more concrete commitment of resources and an agreement that is legally binding.
For some projects, we need to learn more details, and we can bring some ideas authentic. But
no, we connect you with the people, with the organizations that.
For example, for homeless people, I'm always giving the same example. For the homeless people, maybe we may not know the whole details, so we need to cooperate with some, activists. We need to cooperate with students and their conversations. I don't know. And we need to get their help and we need to get their ideas to be able to create a complete solution that we are useful. Otherwise, it will be missing. So, are you going to do these kind of things?
Yeah, that's what we already do.
Okay.
Yeah. If you come to our open project nights, we usually invite about like 1 to 3 organizations to present what they're working on or like what challenges they're facing, so that you can connect directly with the people at the organization who are doing the work, and then kind of get a better understanding of all of the different challenges they face and ask them questions, right? So if there are things you need to understand, and then we're working on doing that more for the future hackathons. So the hackathons this year, hopefully we'll get committed resources to make sure, like I was just saying earlier, but then we always have people on site to answer questions. Anybody who has a challenge. So for the city, they've had a couple people on site before to present the challenge and then to answer questions. So you could see like, do I really need to think about fire hydrants, or is it specifically the ones that are attached to the buildings versus the ones that are sitting on the sidewalk? And then they can answer those questions for you, so then you can develop a better solution. But yeah, we do that work. Yes, agreement. Okay, sorry. So any last things? I think you had your hand raised earlier.
No, I was piggybacking on what he was saying. The fact that all we're doing is in vain because we come up with all these great ideas, but you address my point, which is the fact that we need to make sure that those in authority to actually effect these changes and to bring more resources to the table, that they are aware of these solutions and because I wasn't.
Well, I mean, for us, one of the reasons why Impact Hub is involved is we support entrepreneurial solutions, right? So for me, if I can help you start a business from solving somebody's problem and get you money to actually start it, that's a win for us, right? And we want to make sure more people have access to it.
I have a question. What is the people who are interpreters that you just mentioned that, they are aware of what's happening. So what is the openness and the transparency to accept that something needs to be changed and that somebody out here is actually going to impact that change? What is their goals? Is anybody having conversations in the rooms with these people to find out what their needs are? Because I think a lot of times people, we out here, we're all creating solutions and we can see a problem, but the people the stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
Is that bothering them? What is keeping them up at night? So I think the conversation needs to come from a place of, I have a benefit to match your need, but if you don't realize you have a need, or you don't think there's a solution to this need that's there, then that's what's happening. people are creating all these things and it's falling flat because they are not having these open conversations.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where maybe workshops come in. So in addition to the Scrum and Agile, how do you do human-centered design, right? How do you make sure that you go out into the community and include people in the problem-solving process? So that the design with is really important. Yeah, I know it hasn't been how it has been in the past, but again, we're creating this now. So let's say from day one, you have to make sure that your constituents or the people who are the intended beneficiaries are actually involved in that. Yeah. So getting out of the building is also part of it.
Well, it's like enterprise software. Your intended beneficiaries are residents in the city. People writing checks, politicians, or city employees.
Maybe.
So
maybe
there's
not.
a lot of mismatch.
Well, maybe
between
not.
people.
If we can crowdfund solutions, then the people who are providing the funds are also going to be the intended beneficiaries of the solutions. Well, I mean, we can solve some of these problems. Anything else? Because I think we're at time, right?
Yes.
One of the things I wanted to get to, but we don't have to right now, we can do it online. What do we want tomorrow to look like? I feel like we had some conversation on that already. Michelle captured it, so we'll talk about what do we want countries to be like in 3 years. This is just an example that they provided. So the example.
It looks like it says CIA, but it says CFA.
Yeah, CFA, Code for
I was
America.
thinking, wow, this is getting interesting.
Yeah, so the idea was that the example that Code for America provided is that today, a budding qualitative researcher shows up to a Brigade weekly hack night. There are no active projects for her, so she looks at CFA's website, can't find other ways to get involved, so she leaves. And she says that's why this Code for America called action. So it doesn't seem very actionable. But in 3 years, what we want is that this same person learns of Code for America's community of practice through the email list, and she joins 500 peers learning from some of the brightest qualitative researchers in the country. And she joins the 911 National Action Team, applying her skills to conduct trauma-informed interviews locally, if you're saying talking with beneficiaries, to understand community needs of 911. And as a registered volunteer, she contributes $50 a month to the network that invested in her. And then she starts to lead Code for Des Moines, developing new developers locally and a national hotbed for understanding the needs of everyday people. So it becomes this cycle. Right? So the ultimate goal, I think, is to engage people, train them, upskill them, connect them with resources. They can continue doing the process in their community. If there's something else that you'd want to see in 3 years, please let us know. Resources, I think, to find is really critical. So yeah, resources do goal setting, but I want to be mindful of if you guys need to get help. But think about what themes and values we want to center our work on, SDGs. I mean, I'm already thinking of what we naturally have in Houston is energy, which means a lot of engineers, developers, technical project managers, product managers, etc. The healthcare, manufacturing.
I've been breaking it around education, energy, and health, and then breaking it up like on the upstream, midstream, and downstream, but then tying a lot of things back. So it's on the community or the ecosystem development that seems to work because it's works in mainly every community, but each community has their strengths and weaknesses, and they have I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but there's things like you were saying in 311 that you can easily just start tackling that may not fit along with the regular, large reaching.
That's the way they use them. What was the name of that place?
Technology Center, and
Yeah,
then using it
technology center with design it. But we're new. We're going to do new things.
Yeah, well, in terms of the SDGs, there's things that are aligned with climate sustainability and sustainable cities and communities. There's also reducing inequalities, improving gender equality, health and well-being. So there are a lot that are also kind of horizontal across a lot of different other things. So it's just kind of finding out which SDGs do you want to cluster together and say, this is what we're tackling, and then in what way can we tackle it. But that can be a conversation for the next time. What should we prioritize for the next year? And strategies, and who else needs to be involved? So
What is the monthly?
it's on Wednesdays.
We were doing the second or the third Wednesday. I'm blanking out right now. And in this conversation, we were also gonna see if we needed to evolve that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you guys are subscribed to our newsletter, and I left my computer up front so that if you wanna put your information in to make sure you get the follow-up items, go ahead and sign that up there, so you can get those things. But it typically is either the second or the third Wednesday.
Do Wednesdays work for everybody? And then, do you like to come into the space, or do you prefer to operate virtually? I
miss people.
This is our first in-person one in London.
Hybrid. Yeah, okay, and then next steps. So next steps, we were going to do breakdown activities and what you want and what you want to make happen, and then your commitments. But again, think about it, and we can discuss it like online. We can develop a Slack channel and have everybody share your thoughts there. Do you all use Slack? If you have to.
I use Slack.
Anybody use Discord? Okay, so not as much as Slack. Do you prefer Slack, or would you like a group on a social media network? Like a group on LinkedIn? Yeah.